Hey, Clemson family, we are going to do a spring preview on the linebackers. We talked about defensive line in our previous episode, and there is a name on this linebacker core that just keeps getting harder and harder and harder to be skeptical about despite his youth. We'll get into that in just a few minutes, won't we?
We will. I'm Daniel Shirley. We'll also get into basketball. Postseason play is here. We'll find out who the Tigers play Wednesday night. They've got the late game in the ACC tournament. They'll play the winner of Boston College and Miami. And if they win, they'll play Virginia. So, we'll see what's next for the Tigers. They're in the NCAA tournament. There's no doubt about that moving forward. I think even if they lose Wednesday night, or if they, I don't think, I know if they lose Wednesday night, they'll still be in the NCAA tournament. But you'd like to see them go on a run here in the postseason. I think, Bill, I would say this has been a solid regular season, but it could have been a special regular season. I saw that post on a board, something similar to that earlier, and it just kind of got me thinking of this team could have been special. It could have been, one of the best teams we've ever seen in Clemson history. And I don't, and not by one of the best. I mean, like top two or three best. And now we'll see if they go on a run in the NCAA tournament, then okay, sure, maybe it can get up into that mix. But doesn't it feel like 11-9 in the ACC was about as bad as this team could have been in the ACC? Think about the Duke loss at home, or the Duke loss on the road, the Virginia loss at home, the NC State loss at home, the Georgia Tech loss at home. There was the Notre Dame game on the road. That's 5 or 6 right there where you go, there's no way they should have lost those games.
And arguably, I
And they
would add
did.
the Wake Forest loss to close out the regular season. Apologies to my Wake Forest buddies out there. I'm Bill Zimmerman. This is the Reign Supreme All-Way podcast. You can check out all our past episodes, youtube.com/Clemson Kickoff. And yeah, I was disappointed by that little, what do you want to call it, speed bump, run up over the curb. What did they, however they blew it against Wake Forest, they did, and lost that double bye. They could have been the number 4 team, sitting there waiting, pretty like Virginia will be waiting for the winner of Clemson's opener in this tournament. And by the way, PJ Hall named today, Monday, as we record this, to first team All ACC. So you also wonder, where would this program be without a talent like that leading the way for them? But absolutely, it's another. The Wake loss just brings another iteration of a Brad Brownell team that is not necessarily getting as strong as it could be as the regular season winds up.
Yeah, look, I mean, at some point you have to credit Wake for hitting shots, and I'm okay with that.
Sure.
But that happens a lot, to where, remember the Miami game when Miami scored 90 points or what it was in the
I've
second
been
half? I know
thinking
that
about that since I
I
saw that draw. Yep.
I'm exaggerating, obviously, but uh, I got killed on social media as, oh, Miami's a great offensive team. They had a great offensive night. Eh, eh, okay, they're not really a great offensive team. Now they've struggled throughout the second half of the season, but there's a lot. Clemson's defense this year has lacked. Brad Brownell has said that. Don't yell at me for saying that. Brad Brownell has said that. Now, they're not the worst defensive. Did I say offense? I meant defense. They're not the worst defensive team ever, but they're not a very good defensive team. They're a pretty good offensive team most of the time, but it just feels like when they lose a game like that, the excuses come out. Oh, well, that team had a great offensive night. Well, yeah, you have a great offensive night when the other team's not very good defensively. And, I go back to, when I said 2 or 3 best teams in Clemson history, in my lifetime, I go back to the Larry Nance team that went to the Elite Eight.
Right.
Right. And then I go back to the team when we were freshmen in college. They won the ACC regular season title. That group went to the Sweet 16. I don't even want to say the name of the guy who played for UConn. I will not say it. I know it. I refuse to say it. I still don't think the clock started when he touched the ball.
Tate George.
He got the shot off in time, but I don't think the clock started when he touched the ball.
And we matched up well with Duke, who would have been the grade 8 opponent. That could have been a Final
Absolutely.
Four team, and it had the talent to be a Final Four team
Absolutely.
with the Twin Towers, didn't it, Eldon and Dale?
Absolutely. Great team. I go back to the Horace Grant team, right? That if Grayson Marshall doesn't get hurt, that team had something special. So this team had a chance to be that. And Bill, look, I mentioned 6 games that they should have won during the regular season. If they just win 3 of those, they get the double bye in the ACC tournament, and there's a lot of people saying they're a 5 or 6 seed in the NCAA tournament. They're probably a 3 seed, or at worst a 4 seed in the NCAA tournament. So again, season's not finished. I get that. I know people are probably watching this right now yelling, "You idiot. They still got to play the ACC tournament. They still got to play the NCAA tournament." That's fine. They could go down as the best Clemson team ever if they go on a run here. We'll find out.
Yep, they have that potential. And I
Yes.
think it's hard to imagine, at least for me, because this isn't a team that has put together big runs schedule wise, right? It has put together big runs within a game scoring wise, but as far as long win streaks, like they seem to, I know there's been some guys fighting through some injuries for sure, and that can actually legitimately get in the way of putting together a long winning streak. But that's what this team is, and can it do it in a tight time frame of an ACC tournament? Will the single bye be enough to overcome either Boston College or Miami? I would think this team beats Boston College if if the Eagles can upset the Hurricanes. We have seen, however, that this team does not necessarily match up well with Miami. So, which version of Miami is going to come out that night might be what determines that game if it is Miami playing against Clemson. And then Virginia is just they're just so good at what they do. They make you run, not up and down the court. They are not the Showtime Lakers. They are not UNLV under Jerry Tarkanian. That's not what they are, but they make you run side to side. They stretch you horizontally across the court, and they wear you down. And that seems to be a recipe. And we saw it in the first matchup. Clemson got back into that game with some hard work, forcing some misses, taking advantage of some unforced errors, a combination of both. But then, as so often happens in the game of basketball, NBA or college, the team that made that comeback can't sustain it through the closing moments of the game. Dead legs, whatever you want to call it. After having made that comeback, the lead team often finds a second wind and has an ability to snuff out that comeback attempt. So we will see what happens. If there's one key player, Daniel, is it PJ for you, or is there somebody else that you think will be key in making an ACC tournament run?
I think it's Chase Hunter. I do. Because look, I think PJ has shaky moments. So everybody does, right? Joe Girard misses shots. Everybody does. When Chase Hunter plays well, they typically win. And I think the thing for me is I need Chase Hunter to attack the basket. I love Chase Hunter's game. I do. I'm a fan. But when he starts settling for threes, I think that hurts the team. And it's the same thing with PJ. PJ needs to get in the post, right? This team has an advantage over most teams it's going to play on the offensive end when PJ and Ian Shefflin are involved offensively in the post, right? So PJ needs to get in the post, dump it down to him, see what happens. But Chase Hunter needs to attack the basket. When he's driving to the basket, he's really dangerous, and he's a handful. So let's, if I'm coaching the team, which I know nobody wants that to happen, even me,
not even your
family,
kids, Daniel.
not even my wife and kids don't want that to happen. I'm telling, let's leave the 3-point shooting to Joe Girard, and let's everybody else attack the basket. And I think that would be the winning formula for this group. Chase, I'm not saying ignore the 3-point shooting, and I'm not saying Chase Hunter shouldn't shoot 3-pointers, but he and PJ Hall should not be taking more deep shots or as many deep shots as Joe Girard. I just don't think they can hit them, but they're just not consistent enough for that to be the game plan. And I have people tell me, "Oh, they're open." Well, why do you think they're open? Because do you see Joe Girard get many open shots? No, because the defenses know we can't let that guy get a bunch of shots.
Right.
They're backing off the other guys and challenging them to shoot them. And just because a shot's open doesn't mean it's a good shot.
Right.
If it's the wrong person taking it, if it's not in the flow of the offense, it can be a bad shot. So no, I think it's got to be Chase Hunter for me. I look, I like his game. I like him a lot. I think he's a talented player. I think he's done a lot of good things for Clemson. So I'm a fan, but I want to see him attacking the basket, because when he's attacking the basket and when PJ and Ian are in the post, it makes them way more difficult to guard and makes them way more dangerous, and it frees up Joe Girard for shots. And I think that's the way they got to win. I don't look, excuse me, I don't think they're going to shut down teams defensively.
Right.
They're not going to win a bunch of games 60-55. I think they've got to beat teams offensively. And in my mind, that's the best way to do it.
There you go. YouTube.com/Clemson Kickoff. We haven't talked a lot of basketball this year. I hope we're about to have a lot more reasons to talk about basketball. We'll see how Coach Brad Brownell, should we say historically embattled head coach Brad Brownell. I mean, this is the run that he has to make. And we've talked about him a little bit this season. We talked more about him last season. And this could be a defining postseason one way or the other for the head coach and the direction of the program moving forward. Talk about direction, always key to linebackers. Terrible segue, but I'm just going to stick with it.
Not terrible, shaky, but not terrible.
Yeah. I should have fit the gap better on that, right? Speaking of the Gator Bowl and the linebackers, there were some misses, and I've said before there are always going to be misses, and I think that's going to be a key to seeing how these linebackers are going to sort of, I don't want to say line up, but who's going to have the most snaps and at which positions in this linebacking core moving forward. I'm going to be real encouraged to see who's playing next to who, because the headline of the week has been Sammy Brown, and just the quotes that he has been getting from his fellow players, from his coaches, about what a natural he is, about physically how he looks ready out there. I don't know if he's going to start over Wade Woodaz, who I really had finally started to feel like, all right, that's who you have to go with at middle linebacker, and the odds-on favorite to get the most snaps there. I don't know. How many snaps is Sammy Brown going to get against the Georgia Bulldogs, near where he's from, and then moving forward through the rest of the season?
Oh, I think he's going to play a lot, and I think he's going to play a key role. And we've seen some really good linebackers at Clemson in our time watching Clemson football, right? I mean, I go back to that group you go back to Jeff Davis, right? First off. And then you go back to that group that was there when we were in school, Levon Kirkland and John Johnson and Ed McDaniel. And I know I'm leaving somebody out, Wayne Simmons, because there were so many of them.
Mm-hmm. Rest in peace.
And we've seen good linebackers since then. Keith Adams, great player.
Yep. And,
that has continued throughout this run of Dabo Swinney and the playoff and all that. Jeremiah Trotter's as good as anybody who's come through the program. And Barrett Carter, I think Barrett Carter had a little bit of a down year, and you and I have discussed that. I was expecting Barrett Carter to have such a great year that he was going to be a first-round pick, and it just didn't happen. I think that's
really
why
glad he's back. So
I'm glad he's back.
Selfishly.
Absolutely. I think that's why he came back, right? And so I think Sammy Brown can fit into that mold. I mean, and where does Wade Woodaz fit? And so I think really good top three linebackers, right? And I'm not dismissing anybody else on the roster. I think they've got some good linebackers, but I like Woodaz and Carter as the top two spots, but then Sammy Brown, man, I think he's going to make it so difficult for the coaches to keep him off the field.
Yeah.
And so you have to, where does it fit? All that stuff is important, but if he's that good, he's going to play. Dabo Swinney says all the time, the best guys play.
Yeah.
And we've seen Clemson, not bench, but, move players ahead of somebody who we think is pretty good. I mean, they did have a quarterback who led them to the playoff in Kelly Bryant, and then the next year he lost his job.
Yep, exactly what I was thinking.
So, there's no jobs guaranteed. There's no spot that's guaranteed. And if Sammy Brown's that good, I mean, I could imagine a Sammy Brown, Wade Woodaz, Barrett Carter rotation.
Yeah.
And that doesn't bother me one bit.
And Woodaz can play both spots, but
Yes,
what I like most about Brown, and I'll briefly throw a little cold water on this. We've heard about a lot of freshmen through the years. Oh, this guy is going to be great. This is the next best thing since sliced bread. Both sides of the ball, and all that encouragement and all that enthusiasm doesn't help the player materialize as a regular contributor through the years. So there is a ways to go, and this is again about what do we want to see in that spring game? What do we want to look for? How proficient will Brown be at being in the right place at the right time? How much will Wade Woodaz have bulked up in case he does need to be the starter at middle linebacker? How much will Kobe McLeod have improved? But just the fact that Brown appears that he can be in that mix really helps two guys that I think highly of, and I know you did as well as recruits, D. Creighton and Jamal Anderson Jr., who really both are more crafted, more geared to be an outside guy than come into the middle. So if you're looking at a rotation or a competition between Woodaz and Brown and McLeod in the middle, and McLeod didn't look terrible in that Gator Bowl. And he didn't. Sure. He was responsible for some of those misfits on the run stops, and I get it. And I don't think anybody was exempt from that in that particular game, facing an SEC foe that's pretty strong and decent, middle of the pack or better in Kentucky. And this is another offseason to improve. So that mix in the middle, I don't think there's any clear starter. But I also don't think this is, well, if you got three guys, you've got none. I think middle linebacker is looking more solid. Brown helps that out quite a bit. It helps outside linebacker be better. They can be a little more situational. Do they want to use Woodaz in the middle in a certain spot? Do they want to use, Brown in another spot in the middle? Do they want to go three guys and have all those guys on the field at the same time? Woodaz is cross-trained. He's getting an off-season to really get even better in that regard, and you can leave Barrett Carter at what he's natural at. You don't feel like you have to force him into the middle out of desperation either. So it just looks really good, and I am eager also to watch Jamal Anderson Jr. and D. Creighton get more reps out there. How is Creighton going to find some snaps that he can get throughout the season? And look, if maybe the primary thing about this is you don't feel like, hey, there's one guy who's got to get it done. And if he sprains an ankle in the first quarter of the Georgia game, you don't feel like the offense is lost. And yeah, they're going to have to cover Oscar Delp. They're going to have to be very careful of Trevor Etienne and the rest of the running backs, blanking on who the expected starter is there. You sure would like to get Andrew Paul after he decided not to commit at the last minute to Clemson a couple of years ago and make a little physical statement on that guy, right? At some point during the game. You feel like they're competent. You feel like there's some depth there, and you know what Carter can be. You know what Woodaz can be. And then you're looking for McLeod to take that next step, for Creighton to take that next step, and for Brown to take a big first step.
There's some depth. And adding Sammy Brown to that mix certainly elevates the room, right? I think if he's not there, and again, we got to find out what he is too. He hasn't played a snap, so let's not put him in the starting lineup just yet. But is he a Sammy Watkins where he's ready to play immediately, or is he a guy that might need some seasoning and then steps into that role a little bit later? Both are fine. Absolutely are fine. But I think that he's going to be a guy who plays right away, whether it's depth guy, special teams, whatever it is, I don't think there's any doubt he helps this team in 2024. And look, I think you mentioned some important names there. I think McLeod is important. He has played well when he's had his chance. He hasn't had much of a chance, but he's played pretty well. Nobody's perfect.
Right.
And then Creighton and Anderson, I think, are key, right? Because nobody is going to play the whole season without getting banged up, especially at that position.
Right.
So you need 6, 7, 8 linebackers to kind of get through the season and for them to play well. So I think they are absolutely important. I think they both have a chance. They might be those guys, red shirt, not play a lot your freshman year, get a little bit bigger, get in the weight room, get in the nutrition room, and then help the team your redshirt freshman, sophomore, junior, whatever year after that. So I like this group, and Sammy Brown makes me like this group a lot more that he's in the mix. I'm glad he's at Clemson and didn't sign with Georgia or whoever else he considered. I think that was a big time get for the Tigers. And look, if you end up again with a 3-man top rotation of Woodaz and Brown and Carter, and then you've got McLeod and Creighton and Anderson in the mix, I think that's a pretty good group.
Do you think they go 3 linebackers a lot against Georgia? And maybe it's a little early to talk about that until we've seen more of these guys. And they could also break glass in case of emergency with Tyler Venables, who knows the defense, could be a chess piece in the right place at the right time. We've talked about that. Drew Woodaz has the potential as well. He'll be a true freshman this year besides Sammy Brown. But maybe we do, if Brown is capable, or if Creighton has taken that next step, or if McLeod has shored up his game, we may see more 4-3, 4-3-4 rather than that 4-2-5 that we saw so much of last year.
I think so. It depends on how Georgia's going to use their tight ends, right? There's no Brock Bowers at Georgia anymore. And I that's the thing about Georgia the last 3 years that was such a nightmare, is how do you cover him? If you cover him with a linebacker, he outruns him. If you cover him with a safety, he bullies him.
Yeah.
And you don't have that. Not that Georgia doesn't have good tight ends. They do. But Brock Bowers is a generational college player.
Yeah.
That's out of the mix. Ladd McConkey's out of the mix in the slot too. So you had to figure out how to cover him. So they've got good players, but those two guys, who both could be first round picks, which is remarkable to even think about, aren't in the mix anymore.
Yeah.
So if whoever Georgia's tight end is, let's say Wade Woodaz can cover him, as opposed to having the nickel out there, then I think you do play a lot of 4-3 in that game to try to help slow down the running game. So it's going to be an interesting chess match in that first game. I don't think Clemson will face anybody else throughout the season offensively like Georgia. So that might change how they play defense. But I think they have the flexibility, even with those 3 linebackers on the field, that you can maybe move Woodaz to kind of a nickel, kind of the Isaiah Simmons kind of a role,
which he's done some of, during his
Dorian
freshman year
O'Daniel,
when he didn't have a lot of size on him yet.
Right. So I think he could play some of that if Sammy Brown can elevate and kind of be that second linebacker.
Absolutely. The other thing I wanted to get in, we only got a couple minutes left here. It will be a credit to Wes Goodwin. A couple of years ago when he took over, he talked about wanting to simplify the linebacker role and not have it be as complex a learn as it was under Brent Venables. And that wasn't really a huge need necessarily for a true freshman. We did see Carter progress quickly. We did see Trotter progress quickly.
Absolutely.
But if they were to be able to start Brown this year, and if they wanted to, and if they needed to, all that groundwork was laid early on when Goodwin said, hey, this is what I'm going to make linebacker, a little more about the athleticism and a little less about the chess match that has to be going on under the helmet the entire time, where you saw, bullware in the title games, hey, everybody, it's going to be on this side, it's going to be on this side, and making the huge tackle behind the line of scrimmage, or then, Skalski working his way kind of from that one outside spot and in, Kendall Joseph working his way from that outside spot and then in. You saw that, every couple of years, the guy who had gotten a little experience on the outside was the guy that was then trusted to handle that middle linebacker role. And that would be a big deal if Sammy Brown can come in and be the middle linebacker without having had college experience.
Yeah, and he's an athlete too. Let's not act like he's just some slow plodding
No,
middle linebacker. This kid is a really talented athlete. I think they're more athletic this year going into the season than at linebacker than maybe they have been in the past. And so we'll see. I think it's going to be a fun group to watch. The thought of those three on the field together at one time really excites me.
yeah.
And trying to help slow down the other team's running game and then what they can do in the passing game as well. But, again, Wes Goodwin gets paid a lot of money to figure that stuff out. And that defensive staff is going to figure it out. And I don't think that it's a problem. Or if it is a problem, it's a good problem because there's more talent in the room.
Lots to watch in that spring game at linebacker, and sometimes the rewatch of the game is key to that, isn't it? YouTube.com/Clemson Kickoff. All our past episodes, subscribe, and you'll be the first to see our new ones as we keep previewing the spring game. Until then, I'm Bill Zimmerman.
I'm Daniel Shirley. Go Tigers.